Welcome to the McGuckin Group podcast, where we help you bridge the gap between your business and talent strategy. At the McGuckin Group, we come alongside the world's most respected organizations and the leaders within them to help build a customized talent journey which allows them to execute their unique business strategy with excellence. During this podcast, you're going to have the opportunity to hear their stories, as well as from our team and other industry experts to help you be part of the 20% of organizations that execute your business strategy to its fullest value. We're career practitioners, not career consultants. Our team provides a strong execution and implementation culture, bringing practical solutions that allow you to go faster and avoid missteps. House rule number 1, we speak the truth. So get ready and enjoy the McGuckin Group podcast.
Hello and welcome. Jeremy, here we are again. It's a thrill to be gearing up for this amazing conversation. We're joined today by Catherine as well. Before we get started, I would love to do some introductions for our audience. Jeremy, let's start with you. Let's have you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it, Audrey. It's always a great time to link up with you and Catherine and talk about what's going on in the industry. I'm Jeremy Vanselous. I'm the president and CEO of the SearchWorks Group. We're an executive search firm that's worked in the EMS industry specifically for the last 15 years or so. I come with about a 24-year background in and around the EMS world. I started my career with Selectron, which is now part of Flex. Moved into some third-party supply chain and procurement operations after that, and then most recently have been with the SearchWorks Group for the last 15 years. And during this time, we've placed hundreds of people with large and small EMS companies all over the world, from the C-suite to individual contributors, and across all of those primary disciplines within the business: operations, engineering, quality, supply chain, program management, business development. But EMS is what we live and breathe here, and have been for some time, and expect to for the foreseeable future. But thanks for having us. Yeah,
Jeremy, one of the things I love about when we get time together, I love about our relationship, and I love about the work we partner on, is your reputation is incredible. Anytime we talk to CEOs at EMS companies, they'll say, yes, Jeremy, we trust him. We would trust him with our life. And so I think that's a big deal. So yes, you've shared with us your bio, but I think your reputation is important as well, Jeremy. So pleasure to have you with us. Catherine, let's hear from you.
Absolutely. I'm love speaking with Jeremy, love speaking with you on this topic, because I spent a decade at Jabil and had the pleasure there of working in the finance organization, all the way from our international taxation group up to commercial finance, operational finance. So I love the industry, and it's really something that I cut my teeth on. And understanding the talent differentiators and what the trends are is just, it's a conversation I always look forward to.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Catherine. And for those of you that are new from our listeners, I'm Audrey McGuckin, the CEO at the McGuckin Group. I've actually worked in the EMS industry for 3 decades. My first foray into EMS was with Jabil. Forbes Alexander, the CFO at Jabil, hired me many years ago, and I had an amazing career that I was incredibly thankful for. And since then, we work with the tier 1, the tier 2, and the tier 3 EMS providers. One of the reasons that our customers say they like working with us is we know where the dead bodies are in EMS. We know how to help you navigate the journey. And one of the things you can be sure of at the McGuckin Group is we have a house rule. And house rule number 1 is to speak the truth, even if it's unpopular, even at the risk of us losing a client. It's something that we care very deeply about. And I think that's something that we share in common, Jeremy. So thrilled to get started.
Yeah.
Catherine, I know you were
get
going to
a-
lead us through some questions. Before we do that, let me see if Jeremy wants to hop in there.
No, I just concur with your point about speaking the truth. It's a differentiator in and of itself, and I think it really does separate folks like you and I from maybe others that provide similar services. So just wanted to note that.
Yes, thanks, Jeremy. Catherine.
Yes, so I'm excited to hear from you both and begin this conversation. Jeremy, I'm going to start with you. You've been in the EMS industry for decades, but what are some of the trends you're seeing now that are different from the past?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I think there are almost standard trends these days that we're seeing or have seen for several years, like, the big nearshoring push, the supply chains, the component supply chains remain a little tricky. They're improving, right? Costs are going up, which is always very, very difficult in the EMS industry specifically. And then we've got labor shortages. Those I wouldn't say are necessarily new or different, but still very, very present. One of the newer trends, though, I think actually comes in from a borrowing perspective, right? The interest rates and how they've increased and how they've impacted the financials of EMS companies, predominantly the smaller and mid-tier who may be private equity backed and may be looking for other lines of credit or things like that to support the business. That is really kind of throwing a wrench into things from a financial perspective, which you may actually, Catherine, you may have some insight on that in terms of how something like this, trickles down through an EMS organization and drives their decisions.
Yes, and it's interesting that it's not necessarily new, but the intensity, and now it's so many factors combining. And when you are in an industry like EMS where every penny on multiple units counts and you're thinking of how do I navigate globally, having a team that is trained and also oriented to be looking for every opportunity is a huge differentiator as companies are striving to increase margin for shareholders.
Yeah.
So, Audrey, would you add anything to that? What are the trends in talent and leadership that you're seeing these days?
Yeah, and I love that question. I remember when I first started in the EMS industry, we would always hear the mantra of what we do is simple. What we do is not complex. We just build boards. I mean, that was decades ago. But I think one of the things that's changed from a leadership perspective is we need leaders that can manage complexity and manage it fast. And so that means that leaders with high cognitive capacity, said differently, leaders that can connect the dots quickly, surface to the top. And this idea of, Catherine, you're talking about we need to manage every cent and every dollar in the P&L, and also customer demands are more complex. And then the other piece of the triangle is employees have really high expectations, and their expectations have changed dramatically. They are looking for a very different experience when they go to work for an employer, and they have choices. And so what we're seeing now in EMS is there's a lot to manage. And the thing that's different about EMS from OEMs is the speed. So the speed in which we have to manage it, the speed in which we have to manage the P&L, the speed in which we have to manage complexity, the speed in which we have to manage customer expectations, and the speed in managing employee expectations, because you turn around 1 second and they're gone. And so, that's how I would round that out. I don't know if Jeremy or Catherine, you would add anything to that.
Well, I mean, I'd like to add a little bit more in terms of the other unusual trends that we're seeing. I think it's a bit of a trickle down, right, from the stringent cash flow kind of situation that a lot of companies are in, is thinking about how that actually trickles down to the teams, right? A challenge like that affects everybody in their roles, whether they're in a production role or whether they're in a program management role, dealing with customers, a sales role, or a financial role. The stress, I guess, that kind of creates for people, I think it takes a very compassionate sort of leader to step in and help people through a moment like this. Another interesting topic, I guess, or trend that we're seeing is, we've experienced this kind of like these astronomical increases in compensation for people over the last couple of years, where we might place someone in a new role at 10-15% higher than what they were earning a couple of years ago. Recently, some of those increases have been 25-30% just to go into a competing company. Now, what we're seeing, there's data from ZipRecruiter, there's data from Gusto, which is a payroll management company, that now, after analyzing 20,000 jobs in manufacturing, we're actually seeing compensation, same roles advertised today that from a year ago, actually now down 5% from where they were a year ago. So I think it's important for companies and, of course, people to recognize that we may be coming out of this high growth time, from a compensation perspective. I think, controlling inflation, everything is really starting to level things out, across the board. And that's a new trend that we've seen probably the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the power dynamic shifts and changes, right? Whether it's an employee market or an employer market. And what we find is that there has to be a constant. And the one constant that I've found, Jeremy, is the culture of the organization seems to be a constant. And what I mean by that is, we do a lot of work with Kimball Electronics, and Don Sharon, who recently passed away, one of the things he had me do was talk to the end customer, the OEMs. And I asked them, tell me why you give EMS providers the PO, or tell me why you give them more share of wallet. And what they said is, they typically have access to the same machines, typically have access to the same materials and parts. But one of the things that's different, and one of the things that was different about Kimball Electronics, was their culture. And so they said, we will give an organization more share of wallet, and we will engage with them in a more sticky relationship as a direct result of the quality of their leadership and the quality of their culture. And I think that's a really important point. I like to talk in threes. I was recently asking some leaders at BYD, why do you join EMS and why do you stay? And it's not going to be about money, right? It can shift up and down, but that's not going to be the thing. And it's certainly not going to be just about the environment and in terms of how fast or how slow it goes, but largely what they say is it's to do with the culture.
Yes.
The leadership. And then the third data point, we like to talk in data points in EMS. I used to say to Forbes Alexander, can I carry your bags and can I go to the analysts meetings? And he said, why? And I said, because I really want to understand this idea of value and where does value come from? And Amit was one of the analysts that I talked to at the time. And I said, does leadership and culture really matter when you're valuing a company. And he said 100%. The quality of the vision, the quality of alignment to that vision with the executive team, along with the culture, absolutely impacts valuation. So I just find that all of these data points are now colliding, but let me open up that conversation. Catherine, I don't know if you want to hop in, and then maybe we'll have Jeremy hop in.
Yeah. One of the themes, we haven't directly said, but we're getting there, is complexity is only increasing, and velocity and demand from our end users is only increasing as life cycles of all products shorten. So how do you get the organization and the team that's going to deliver the best results in an agile manner? To Jeremy's point, with empathy, you have to be an employer of choice. You have to be able to attract great people, because you can't build in a process to come up with the unknown, right? It's how the team works together and applies their critical thinking skills and their organizational skills. So I'm always just intrigued when we have these conversations, Audrey, to say, what do you love about where you work? And or why did you choose to come here? Or, why have you stayed for so long? So we're always asking those questions, and typically it's the other people that they're working with and the leaders that they're around. So I'm very, it's an energizing atmosphere when it's the right dynamic, but it can be tricky. You can turn people away if you have a poor impression in the marketplace.
Yeah, Jeremy, you're right at the front end of that. Every day, that's your life.
Yeah, I'm nodding my head because, we're fortunate. In every case, we're fortunate. We do get to work with some companies that have this culture piece fine-tuned, and more importantly, they actually live by it. They make decisions around it. Okay. We have other clients that think they do, and they don't. But they don't know that. They don't know that they don't. So part of our initial conversation with them is sometimes pretty tricky to say, that you have a reputation issue, right? That we're going to have to overcome. And I think a lot of companies miss an opportunity there, right? To take a look in the mirror and kind of, check themselves almost, right? Go to your own website, look at your missions, look at your values. Are they real, or are they just lip service, right? They have to kind of take that moment to determine that. But I'll tell you, companies that create this bad reputation that is not helping them in attracting talent, they've always got revolving doors, going on in leadership. Oh yeah, I've heard it. They were recruiting for that role 6 months ago. Have they still not filled it? No, they filled it and it didn't work out. And here we are again. That happens. In some companies, that happens too often. And then people hear about it. So then the perception in the market is revolving doors at the senior level. So the financial health of the company is a big factor for people. Again, I mentioned it affects everybody in every role, right? The old school sort of unsophisticated leadership style of thinking and not really putting people first, that's a loser strategy. It may have worked in the past, it won't work in the future. And then lacking a really good rewards and recognition piece for your people. Some companies do that poorly. Those are some of the things that we've observed that create a bad reputation for some companies in the market. Then you go the other way, and there's exact same things. Who does that really well? Anyone watching this will think of 3 or 4 companies off the top of my head, or on the top of their head, that they know do that really well, because they've got an excellent reputation in the market, because they've mastered those things. Yeah. So but what we do with companies that might have a bad reputation is sometimes it's a perspective, and it may not be totally accurate. And it's because the story isn't being shared. The story isn't being told. We've got clients who historically have had maybe not the best of reputations, but are genuinely trying to fix that now. They have implemented better processes. They have come together again as a leadership team and reviewed their values and their mission. And they know they want to live by these things. They want to do what Don did at Kimball, right? But it's the front end of that process. Well, who's telling the story? Who's getting that out onto the street? No one is doing that. It comes over time. So that's where we've been able to really advocate for clients who are in this moment of improvement and change, is to get out there and start talking to the talent pool, share this great new story about this great moment of time that should be very exciting and attractive for a candidate to come into. Imagine being a part of a change like that. That would be a lot of not just fun, but it would be very rewarding, right, from a professional perspective. So, those are some things that we observe about companies' reputations in the market, whether they're fantastic today or whether they're wanting to improve on them. It really does come down to getting that story out there, making sure people are aware.
I think that's right, Jeremy. And we have this famous saying at the McGuckin Group, which is the fish rots from the head. And what we mean by that is, yes, you can get the story out there, but if it's not authentic, people will smell that really quickly. Yeah. And one of the paradoxes that we sometimes see is that we'll see a CEO that intrinsically cares about people, and yet they haven't put a process in place. One of the things we do with our clients is we implement the McGuckin method. And it's this idea of how can we be human-centered, which is how can we care about people and how can we use data and process to manage through things. And I think when both of those come together, you get that authenticity. The other thing that we say to people is you can't go from 0 to 10 in 30 days. It's typically a multi-year journey to gain a great reputation in the market or inside your organization. But if you think of it as a journey and building bridges to the future, and let's get started. Let's just get started. And the only place we can start is at the top of the house. I can smell a rat really quickly when we go into a client and they'll say, yes, we want to work with you, Audrey, and your team. And we think that, yes, your suggestions of 360s and leadership feedback are very good. And how about we start at the plant level? How about we start in the middle of the organization? And often what I'll say is, no, how about we start with you as the CEO? How about we get you feedback? How about you lead by example? And so those are the types of pushes that we're trying to do inside of organizations. I see you nodding your head, Jeremy. I'll let you hop in.
Well, no, I mean, that's where you have to test the commitment, right? That it's a qualifier, right, for you to know whether or not this is going to be a successful endeavor and a good use of your time and your team's time to go into this organization and try to drive this change, right? Because your reputation is dependent on how successful this project's going to be, right? And if that project doesn't have support from the top down, and through a time-tested, proven methodology, then yeah, absolutely, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'll let Catherine hop in here in a second. And we have some mile markers. We have some checkpoints along the way. And one of those checkpoints is how much time do we get with the CEO to create the strategy? One of our most favorite clients just now is a client that's headquartered in Asia. I can tell you that Catherine and I are doing a lot of calls at 4:30 a.m. and we're doing a lot of calls at 9:30 a.m. because that's where the CEO is based and he wants to get engaged. Jeremy, I know that same client, you placed a senior HR leader. And one of the reasons they said yes to joining was they knew that we were on this journey together.
Yes, absolutely. And it's one of those stories, right? That if someone isn't out here sharing what the larger vision of the company is, then how would anyone working within the industry have any knowledge or insight that this is a special time?
Ah,
Right. So and in that person's case, that was a primary motivator for them to come take this role. I want to be a part of that kind of change.
Yes.
And to be able to speak honestly. The company is not perfect. The company knows that they have tremendous opportunity to do things differently and better by having a more people-centric philosophy toward their business, and they need someone to come in and help drive those types of changes. Oh, I would love to do that, right? That's perfect.
exactly. And Jeremy, you really just hit on something that's pretty important, is this moment in time. And you called it a special time. And for this particular client, it is a pretty special time. But also, I think the thing that you hit on is the synergies between the work that you do at SearchWorks and the work we do at McGuckin Group, which is this connection between buy and build, right? If they need to buy talent in, you're supporting them. If they're building talent, we're supporting them. But the two are connected. They're very interconnected. Catherine, I know that I can see your wheels spinning. Let me hear your perspective and let me have you hop in.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about the challenges that companies are facing and things are only going to continue to get more complex, that's the perfect journey to go on. And that's why I love our work so much. When you are able to attract and energize talent who's ready to partner with a growing and developing staff that's already subject matter experts, they know the technology, they understand the clients, and you can just complement and build that further. That's the best use of your resources. And in the EMS world, we know it's all about the return on investment and making sure that, yeah, we'll invest in people and we hope that they're going to help to exponentially grow the company and the capability for everyone. So it's all, as Audrey said, connected and in fact necessary, because if you're growing, you're going to need to bring in fresh talent all the time.
Well, and you hit on the return on investment, right? And that relates directly to retention. And I want to mention retention because that is a trend, but it's also a topic that's important with as much as companies are experiencing this talent shortage, right? It's just like it's a lot easier to keep a company sold than to go get a client sold instead of going to get a client. It's the same thing, right? If we know that people are hard to come by, then we absolutely need to have some good retention strategies in place. And retention, it comes down to the individual. I don't think a company can just say, oh, this is how we're going to retain our employees, because every person cares about things differently. So it's, I think Gary Vee said something last week, or one of his many millions of posts, right? Like, if you care about retention, if you care about your employees, go sit down and talk to them. Right? Yeah. It is a very individual thing. I know some of these folks can't go talk to 25,000 employees, but someone on your team can. Yes, so yes. I think it's important on that ROI piece to be thinking about, retention and understanding
and
what's
yes. And with that in mind, just to round us out, with all this conversation, what would be the advice to CEOs in EMS companies right now?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier having that little look in the mirror. I think that's a good starting point for a CEO. Really ask yourself, are my values or our values and our mission accurate, right, to what we represent, say who we are? Are we accurate? And do we operate in a way that actually hold true to those things? Or like I said earlier, is it just lip service, right? It's very powerful for me to be able to talk with a candidate and say, this is one of those rare companies that if you go to their website and you look at their vision and you look at their mission, I can tell you that they make decisions, right? Business decisions and people decisions with those things in mind every day. That's a very powerful thing for me to say, because most employees just think it's vapor, right? And so if you are a company that really operates to those, you're a standout. You are a standout. You are a place people want to work. The other advice is, like I said, listen to people, right? Take a survey. If you haven't taken a survey in forever to see if your people are happy, take a survey, or better yet, take them out to lunch, right? Key people you cannot lose. Take them out to lunch, get talking, make it personal, and understand what's motivating them to stay and what they want in the future, right? What do they want to do next? And then create that path for them. And then invest in people, right? Whether that's your time or whether that's your money, and developing them professionally, helping them achieve additional certifications, training, building them into your future managers. Be investing in them, because they will recognize that. And then that sense of loyalty will build. Back to retention. And then remember, you work for them, not the other way around. So your job as the leader is to position your people for the future and to understand what's important to them. And then that way they'll stay and be a long-term asset for you. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And Audrey, what would you add to that?
Yeah, let me build on that. I remember many years ago when I was in Jabil and we first went on this journey of formal talent development, and really where the McGuckin method was born. And I remember having conversations with Mondo at the time, Mark Mondello, saying, and we have to put some measurement in place for the ROI. And he said, Audrey, we can, but don't waste your time on that. It's just the right thing to do. So we can do all sorts of gymnastics, and you can hire a data analyst, and you can try and figure out the ROI on investing in your people. But we all know intuitively, it's just the right thing to do. So don't waste your time, just get going. I think the other thing is, my advice for CEOs is don't try and do it alone. Get alignment with your executive team. Get all of them on board. And when you can work with somebody external, you can go faster. We can say the hard things that sometimes internal folks can't say. And then the third thing I think is leading with empathy. So you can have all of these processes in place, all of these customer NPS and all of the technology pieces. But when you can lead with empathy, that's the multiplier. And when I say lead with empathy, it means, can I walk in the shoes of others? Can I take on others' perspective? And Jeremy, it comes full circle back to, you can only do that if you're listening to your people.
Yeah.
This was an incredible conversation. Catherine, Jeremy, thanks for taking some time to share our perspectives with our audiences. I'm excited to share this and let folks hear just our conversation. We never planned this out. We had a couple of key questions, but the important thing was the conversation. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Anytime.